If you've ever heard of the creatures called lemmings, you're probably also aware of the idea that every few years, entire herds of these creatures will run off of tall cliffs and fall into the ocean and drown themselves due to population pressure. Turns out, this isn't true, and one of the most famous examples that people would have drawn on in the past to prove this idea was actually fabricated by some nature documentary makers working for the Disney Corporation sometime back in the 20th century. And they were actually enticing or pushing the lemmings off of these cliffs in order to get good footage. But here's what's undeniable. At some point, almost all of us have probably met people, either as individuals or in groups, who rushed toward danger no matter what anyone said or did to point out the danger ahead of them. It's as if they're walking out of the house one day and there's a bit of fog, and they head in the precise direction that you happen to know leads to a cliff, and you tell them, hey, that direction's better, it's parallel to the cliff, and that direction is also parallel to the cliff, and if you go that way there's some nice scenery and there's no cliff. And they say, yeah, but this is the direction I want to go in. And then something bad happens. And if this is somebody that we know well and actually care about, many of us feel a responsibility not only to give people the warning not to run over the cliff, but we feel responsible when they don't listen to us and they go over the cliff anyway. And we end up feeling bad about ourselves. Or if we warn them once or twice and they don't listen, sometimes we beat ourselves up later on that we didn't talk to them more sternly. Here's the problem. Because this is a metaphor, because this is an analogy, because it's a just so story, the literalness of the cliff is often not that real. We may see danger ahead of them, we may try to warn them, but we may not know what's going on in their lives that makes that course of action attractive. And we can't necessarily prove that they're going to take some kind of risk that is unacceptable. We're not living their lives, and sometimes, even though we know something that could go wrong, we're incorrect about how badly it will affect them. And this is one reason people don't listen to us, even if we think we're correct. As a fitness guy for over a decade now, and as a personal trainer for a few years, I feel like I've got some useful experience that I can pass on to other people. And sometimes it's frustrating to give that experience and have people say, yeah, but I'm not going to listen to you. And there's a big risk of becoming frustrated by our inability to get through to people. I made a big mistake with this a couple of months ago. I had an old friend that I had some health concerns about, and I expressed them. And I did it with too much frustration, and I did it without whatever would have communicated to them better that I still respected whatever their own thought process was. I usually think this kind of blunt talk is a bad idea. And in this particular case, I was absolutely right. I obviously didn't do it very effectively, and they reacted very much differently from what I would have hoped for. And at least at this point, we're having a tough time communicating with each other at all. And what I'll say about this is, it doesn't mean never do it, but it does mean that it's riskier than we may think. And if we're trying to help people, we got to be aware of the risks of backfiring. But the other thing I would say is, life ain't fair, sorry. And sometimes even when we do our best, we're not going to save people from the circumstances that they're in or from themselves. A certain number of people are going to run over a cliff, no matter how many barriers we put in their way, no matter how hard we try to hold them back, no matter what we tell them. And if we can't cope with that possibility, we should be working on ourselves, because sooner or later, We have to learn how to accept what is rather than what we think is possible. Because I'll tell you what we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be stampeding ourselves over a cliff in an effort to be the most correct person on the planet or to help the most people that we think we can help, even though what we're doing isn't actually working.